Hi, I'm Jacques Barrett, comedian, actress, and idiot. I have a podcast of my own. It's called Quite the Pickle. Each week, myself and fellow comedian Emma Zammit think up a heinous situation, and then we interview a professional who gives us tricks, tips, and pointers on how to survive the pickle. At the end of each episode, we perform stand-up that we've written about what we learnt in the interview. It's a lot of fun. That's Quite the Pickle, available on iTunes and Spotify.
We hope you enjoy it.
Yeah.
Ahoy! Welcome back to the Andy Social Podcast, another week of podcasting. And before we kick into this episode, which, by the way, if you love snakes, strap yourselves in. Get ready for this one. It's a good one. It's a cracker. But before we kick into it, you know what I'm going to say? That's right. Patreon. Patreon.com/Andy Dowling. It's the best way to support this podcast. It starts at $1 a month. It's dirt cheap. And any additional tier gets you access to the exclusive Patreon podcast episode that comes out every Tuesday morning, 6 a.m., straight to your ear holes. A little bit of fun to brighten your day, brighten your week. So go and check it all out. It's the reason why Andy Social has ramped up to 2 episodes per year. It's because of the Patreon community, which I absolutely love. It's been a game changer for Andy Social, and I just love the support that comes from Patreon. So consider it. Back your boy Andy. Patreon.com/Andy Dowling. Episode 261 of the Andy Social Podcast is here. And this episode is with Stuart McKenzie. Now, Stuart is a snake catcher. A first for Andy Social, just in case you didn't get that. A first. I'm absolutely pumped. I've never had a snake catcher on the podcast. And Stu is the owner of Sunshine Coast Snake Catchers 24/7, an amazing business. I mean, literally it is what they advertise. They catch snakes. And no matter where you guys are in the world, I encourage you to follow this business on Facebook and Instagram in particular, because Stu and Co are absolute kings when it comes to social media. They are putting videos up on a daily basis, especially on the stories of them out and about in the field, collecting snakes from all sorts of weird and wonderful places. It is incredible. It's addictive. I've just spent a hell of a long time just engrossed in these videos, and you guys have got to check this out. So, of course, Stu and I talk about snakes and a whole bunch of stuff in this episode. It's absolutely amazing. Go to Sunshine Coast Snake Catchers 24-7.com.au. Instagram, just search for Sunshine Coast Snake Catchers. The same with Facebook. I'll have all the links in the show notes over at andysocial.net and andydowling.net. But enough yapping from me. Please enjoy this great chat with Stuart McKenzie.
Yeah, so I started work at Australia Zoo. I started actually doing a Bachelor of Science in Zoology and Marine Biology about 10 years ago. I think I finished and graduated from uni and passed all that, and then got a job at the zoo for 6.5 years. So I was working with all the venomous snakes and feeding all the crocs and doing all that dangerous sort of work. And I guess during my first couple of years at the zoo, a couple of the guys there, they were snake catchers, like just on the side, like they did, one or two calls a month kind of thing on their weekend, and had their permit to do it, and just didn't really take it too seriously, just a bit of fun on the side. And I thought, you know what, I'll give that a go, and I got my permit, and started a little Facebook page, and basically went from that. I ended up getting a bit more work and working with a few other snake catchers in the area who were around at the time, and sort of kept building it up over the next sort of 2 or 3 years, to the point where I dropped back at the zoo. So I only worked 2 or 3 days at the zoo, and then 2 or 3 days or whatever the rest was of the week snake catching. And it was a good time. Like, it was a bit of best of both worlds, but I was getting to the point where I was just burning out, because I was literally working 7 days a week. 24/7 with the snake stuff. So, I didn't have a big team. It was just me back then. So if I was in, Maroochydore or Budrum, and I got a call 45 minutes away down in Caboolture, I'd go to it. And then on the way home, if I got a call up in Noosa, I'd drive all the way to the northern parts of the sunny coast and go to that. So I was just doing so many Ks and just driving to ridiculous places at 2 o'clock in the morning, whereas now I just wake up, pass on the job, and go back to sleep. So, so it kind of kept going from there. And the guy I worked for, Richie Gilbert, we sort of did our separate things for a couple of years, and I sort of built up my business, and his business is quite big and as well, and we kind of worked together for a little bit for a time there, but then I ended up buying his business and combining them both together in the end. So it kind of went full circle, and that's when I made the choice to obviously leave the zoo a couple of years ago and just follow this full time, and now it's just mental. So it's I've probably got 3 or 4 other guys who help me on a consistent basis. So basically nearly full-time work for most of the year. And then obviously I do it full-time. I've got a media manager who helps me out with all the social media stuff and also catches a few snakes as well. And yeah, man, it's just crazy. And we've got a few other things in the works this year, hopefully. One of them being obviously the tours and a few other little things happening. But yeah, it's been a crazy sort of 4 or 5 years. Just looking back on, where I was 4 or 5 years ago, I just wouldn't think I'd be where I am now.
I mean, just working at Australia Zoo, there's so many people who would just go, oh man, that sounds like the dream job to have. What was the appeal to sort of start to move away from that and do your own thing?
I think, I always wanted to be my own boss, I think. And, I love working at the zoo. I had some of my fondest memories at the zoo and, being open to that huge range of reptiles, especially that they've got there. In the morning I'd be working with huge Galapagos tortoises. Then I'd be feeding crocs in front of 3,000 people, doing shows, and then I'd be wrangling venomous snakes in the afternoon. Like, it was just insane, like the animals we got to work with. But I guess, I feel like zookeeping for most people has not necessarily a bit of a time limit on it, but I think once you get to that 6 or 7 year mark, it's kind of like you've nearly achieved everything you can in terms of getting signed off for all the animals and working with them all. And I guess you're looking for extra challenges. And for me, I've always been, I guess, highly driven. And I guess I saw opportunities outside of that to go pursue with my own business. And yeah, there was always, I guess, bigger picture stuff with pursuing it full time. The business had a vision of where it was going to go. And that's all starting to sort of come true slowly, which is good. But yeah, I think it was just I didn't lose the passion for the animals or anything. I think it was just time for something different. I think it was just wanted to be my own boss. There was an opportunity. Not many people, I guess, have that opportunity to be their own boss. So I took it. So
yeah, that's a bit of a dream itself.
Oh, that's it. Like, and don't get me wrong. Like, it comes with its positives and negatives. I still, when I was getting it sorted, found myself working 7 days a week. Which, to my wife hated that, but I've been able to change that over the past sort of 12 months and have really reliable snake catchers who've helped me out for years sort of, take the phone and, even when I'm talking to you now, I've just quickly sent one of them a message saying, hey, can I, give you the phone for an hour, transfer it to you, that way I'm not disturbed. So that's really good that I've got that sort of luxury now that if I want to go out for dinner, or just little things like that, I can just transfer the phone and not be bothered. Because trust me, when you want to do something, the phone rings. It's actually insane. Over the years, if I ever find myself just twiddling my thumbs at home, I'm like, right, I'm going to go do some housework, or I'm going to go do this, and as soon as I go to do something and be busy, the phone rings. So, and trust me, when you try and go out for dinner and the phone rings 5 times while you're sitting at trying to eat a meal at a restaurant, it's pretty frustrating. So, yeah, it's good that, I've got reliable people now and they're sort of willing to help out all the time, which is great.
So it'd be interesting to know, I mean, obviously there's the OG story of the business itself, but I mean, for you growing up, I mean, did you have experience handling reptiles as a kid? Did you have family members that were involved in that sort of stuff?
Not really family members, but it was, it was a strange. I had my first 2 pets were actually 2 shingleback lizards, and I've actually still got one, which is the crazy thing, and I reckon it's about 25 years old. So, yeah. So my first 2 pets were lizards, which is a bit strange, I guess. Usually, people, kids have cats and dogs or something like that. But I guess snakes was never, a fascination. I was always fascinated by lizards. Weirdly, so I was lucky enough that my parents took my brother and I, tripping around Australia in a camper trailer, basically from the time that probably with kindergarten, sort of age 5 or 6, all the way through. I think the last trip I did with them was maybe when I was 18. So basically went everywhere. And, the whole time we're camping, we're obviously looking for reptiles and chasing lizards and all sorts of stuff. It was never snakes, though. I think snakes came when I went to the zoo, and, you basically start working with them day one in the reptile department. And, kind of went from there. And I've generally been a fast learner and with that sort of stuff. And, I really enjoyed it, enjoy the challenge, because it is, it can be challenging working with different species of snake. And I think that's where it all sort of started, the whole snake thing. But you've always been interested in reptiles.
Do you think that having the fascination with lizards and just being sort of surrounded by that sort of helped you bridge the gap with snakes? Because, I think stereotypically when people talk about some of their biggest fears, it's things like snakes and spiders and the likes, which sort of turn people off, and it's probably what you see all the time, every day out in the field. Do you think that sort of helped you sort of bridge that gap when you started working at the zoo, to sort of go, this is not a fear or anything that I need to worry about?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think the fact that, I think people even have, fears of, well, not fears necessarily, but, when they see a lizard, they don't want to just go grab it, you know what I mean, and handle it. But I guess I always had that inquisitiveness when it comes to lizards. And I think that did help. Like, I felt reasonably comfortable handling snakes when I first started at the zoo. So I think, definitely think it helped bridge the gap, and I guess had that, early confidence when it came to snakes, and sort of got the hang of it maybe a bit quicker than someone who hadn't really had any experience with reptiles in their past.
Was there certain things that you had assumptions of when it came to snakes that were quickly sort of dispelled when you started working with them and with people that were experienced handling snakes? Were there certain things, behaviours and things you just had no awareness of when it comes to snake life?
I think so. Like, I think you always get this, growing up, especially with, my parents being boomers and, that sort of generation, where a lot of them are just like, any snake's a good snake. A good snake's a dead snake, sorry.
Yeah.
And, I still remember my first ever experience with a snake was my dad killing a brown snake like 25 years ago in our backyard. And, he obviously hasn't done it since then, but that was like a memory which I'll sort of never forget. But I just thought that was normal back then, you know what I mean? And I thought, snake, you know what I mean? That's normal. But yeah, obviously learning to work with them, and I guess learning their behaviours and realising that these things are terrified of us, you know what I mean? They're not out to get us at all. I've seen even the most defensive snakes, the Easton Brown snake, I've seen them terrified, you know what I mean? Like, they are genuinely terrified of humans. They don't want anything to do with us. But the only time they get angry, and I don't like to use the word aggressive, it's more defensive. When they get defensive is only because people are bothering them. They're never going to, go out of their way. So I guess just opening my eyes to that sort of thing, and I guess understanding them a little bit more. And I remember when I first started learning about snakes, someone told me that you got to think about life from a snake's eyes. They're on the ground and basically looking up at everything. So everything to them is huge. Everything to them is big and scary. I guess you just learn to sort of respect them and learn the behaviours slowly, and now completely understand, I guess, and look back, to all those times where maybe even as a kid I was probably even a little bit nervous around snakes, but it probably wasn't necessary. So
yeah, I grew up in Queensland and I was all over the shop. My parents live in Redcliffe, and I lived out in Cunnamulla. I lived in Emerald and Rockhampton as a kid, and so snakes was sort of this thing very similar to what you said. Like, I think my folks sort of had a similar sort of outlook on what the role of a snake is, and its purpose or its value, and I think the community sort of had a very similar sort of outlook. So it was I think just any thoughts around snakes were surrounded with fear. And you would just, there was nothing appealing about a snake whatsoever. So every time it was spoken about was some sort of tragedy that's occurred, or some sort of, surprise that, it's been discovered somewhere that it shouldn't be. And it's always been a negative sort of storyline that's been attached to any sort of snake. And especially up there where you talk about Well, I mean, this is something we sort of wear as a badge of pride with being Australian. We talk about, we have like whatever it is, like 8 out of the top 10 deadliest snakes or whatever it might be. And so
Yeah.
that was life for me. I mean, it was always about snakes are extremely dangerous. Stay away from them. And if you do come across them, look out, you're going to be in trouble. And, it might be best to do what your father did many years ago.
Well, that's it. It's just like, people were terrified. And I guess knowledge is power, and people just didn't understand them. And there's still people out there who don't understand. I still get people saying ridiculous things on my social media posts, and, you try and tell them otherwise, but they're just stuck in their ways. But, I think it's the same with spiders. I think it's just, like the way the animal looks, the fact that snakes don't have any legs, it creeps people out. And spiders obviously so fast, they're creepy crawly, that sort of thing. But even spiders, like I have a bit of a fear of spiders. I didn't want one on me, that's for sure. But, nowadays if there's a spider inside, I just go put my hand, even if it's a huntsman or a wolf spider, I just put my hand out, crawl straight into my hand and then take it outside. Like, I guess it's one of those things, hey, where it's like just understanding the animal, and over time, even when I worked at the zoo, working with the different animals, we still used to do experiences where people would come in and they'd be terrified of these animals, but it's just because they don't understand them. You know what I mean? Like, even crocodiles, like, don't get me wrong, crocodiles are extremely aggressive, and if they had their chance, they would try and eat you 100%, especially the ones like that we feed at the zoo, because they've been there forever, and, they occasionally try and do little things to and try and trick you. But even when I was working with crocodiles, you get to know them, and you still have that really healthy respect for them, but you don't necessarily, wouldn't say fear them as such. Like, there's always a slight bit of nervousness when you hop in an enclosure with a crocodile, but it's a calculated sort of fear or nervousness, I guess, because without it, like, you're just going to turn into a cowboy and get bitten. So you do need that element. But yeah, I guess as you learn to know more about the behaviours of these animals, you feel a bit more comfortable around them and that sort of thing. So,
oh man, I'm just thinking about what you said before about just letting the huntsman sort of walk onto your hand and go. I think most people go, "Oh, fuck that." I mean, there's always that joke of you see a meme on the internet or something like that, and there's a picture of a huntsman or a spider, and it's just like suddenly the next picture is like the entire house is on fire. It's just like, I'd rather burn the house down than have to deal with that spider. It's just, but it's funny. I mean, I think it's in our culture, it's in movies, it's in books. It's always portrayed as a negative thing, as a these are things to be feared, and obviously as you're sort of more immersed with them and you're dealing with them on a day-to-day basis, obviously it's a completely different story. You got a different relationship with them, and I think one of the things I might jump to it. I'll jump all over the place actually, but one of the fascinations I've found with what you do is just the amount of social media stuff that you do and the videos that you put up, because even me skimming through and watching these videos, which get a lot of hype, I'm starting to see a different side to these snakes. There's there's personality to them, and I'm actually warming to these snakes, and especially the way that you're giving commentary to what you're doing as well. And it's I don't know, I'm starting to feel for these snakes a little bit.
Well, that's it. Like, I think you've got to. There's ways you've got to think about it. Different posts do better than others, and the ones that always do well is something that's either really big or really, a snake that may have been a little bit striky or grumpy on the time. Like, obviously those ones do very well, but as we try and explain, even if I'm catching a 6-foot brown snake which is trying to bite me in the face, I still explain the only reason he's doing this is because I've grabbed him by the tail, and I say that to people. They're like, "Oh, he was trying to bite you," and blah blah blah. When they're watching me catch him, and I'm like, "Well, what would you do if I grabbed you by the legs and flipped you off your feet and started dragging you around and try to put you in a bag? You're going to swing punches at my face." So, you've just got to put yourself in the snake's shoes, and obviously we're as gentle as possible and all that sort of stuff. But they think that they're about to get eaten when something grabs them. But I also try and demonstrate how calm they can be as well, especially with the pythons, and even I've had brown snakes which I pick up and they do nothing. They're just like a slug. and they're super chilled out, and yeah, we always try and demonstrate how cool they are. Obviously, we try and demonstrate on occasion how dangerous they can be. I guess just whether that's how fast they can strike, or if you get too close, what happens, or how fast they can move, which is always good for people to see when we're chasing them through backyards, because they can just vanish in a blink of an eye. But that just sort of shows that they just want to try and get away from you. Yeah, no, the social media, the power of social media is ridiculous. It's pretty crazy these days, and it seems like the world is nearly controlled by social media, and it's my business has benefited greatly from social media, but I think the people of the sunny coast and Australia and the world who learn from social media, especially when it comes to animals and that, it's very positive for that as well, which is great.
Yes, I mean, one of the things I noticed with the videos is I think you put a video up about a day ago for that Easton Brown. And
in the netting, yeah,
and already it's got a couple 100,000 views. Just like smash it, like just straight away. Like and obviously, I think it just intrigues people straight away. Once people want to see what's going on.
Well, that's it. Yeah, it's as soon as people hear the word Easton Brown, or we don't catch any taipans here. They are potentially here up north in Noosa, like above Noosa, but we've never caught one on a snake call. But as soon as people hear these, tiger snake or Easton Brown or red belly, it triggers. They just want to, whoa, what's going on here? And even like the brown snake, like I reckon 5-6 years ago, if I had to put that up, half the comments would have been like, oh, why don't you just chop its head off, or why don't you just leave it there to die? Whereas I reckon there was only 1 or 2 of those comments this time, and the rest of them are like, oh, such a beautiful snake. Look, he just wanted to get away, or you did a great job, or you rescued him. I'm so glad he's okay. Like, I feel like attitudes and that have swung around a lot, which is good. And that in turn, helps the snakes, and it sort of tells us that we're doing our job correctly, I guess.
Do you find that the thoughts or the perceptions of snakes have changed also with the people who actually call you up to use your services? Because no doubt there's fear that's probably prompting them to call you, but do you find that the way that people treat, even to be motivated to call you guys instead of just attempting to go and deal with the snake themselves, I guess probably speaks volumes?
Oh, 100%. I think, and that's evolved over the years, and this is one of my favourite parts of the job is the people I meet. I meet 120 kilo blokes who run and scream away when I'm trying to catch snakes, and I have 5 foot, 40 kilogram ladies who are just right up in there being like, oh, check out this snake, that's awesome. It's just such a range of emotions from men and women and kids, you know what I mean? We catch for so many families, and the kids are so intrigued, and they're scared at the start, or they might even be crying when I arrive, and then they see me catch it and see that this python is completely harmless, and all I wanted to do was get away, and they're like, oh wow, okay, maybe I don't have to fear snakes, maybe I can just sort of respect them. But yeah, like the phone calls have definitely changed. People obviously respect our job a lot more, and I guess a lot of the phone calls back in the day were people terrified, like literally just terrified, just demanding us to get there within 5 minutes, even though it's near impossible sometimes. But now, yeah, a lot of people, like so many people are ringing up, and they're like, oh, I don't mind having the snake here, but we've got a dog. I just don't want my dog to hurt it. I don't want it to go out on the road and get run over. Can you come and relocate it? I'm happy to pay. Can you come get it? And if people don't have pets, we often just encourage people to leave it, especially if it's a harmless snake. Generally, if it's a brown snake in quite a built-up area, we recommend relocation. But a lot of people just want them relocated just for the snake's safety. But don't get me wrong, there's still people out there who literally cannot stand the sight of a snake and call us out. So that's still definitely around. But I think, even the phone call and people's perceptions of snakes has changed.
Does it depend on the type of snake as opposed, which determines where you choose to relocate it? Is there particular places that are beneficial?
Yeah, we've got pretty. Well, yes and no. Like there's obviously, like with your red bellies and your keelbacks, and there's species that generally are found around a water source. We try and relocate it near a water source, but we've got super strict rules on where we can actually take our snakes that we catch, which is frustrating. And it's something I'm working on at the moment, trying to loosen those rules a little bit, just because, with all the development going on and that sort of thing, we're running out of spots to release them. And I guess one of the big things is, conservation areas and stuff, which are huge. We're just not meant to release them in there, and we've got to obviously abide by those rules. But it's hard these days because there's so much development and tiny little bits of land that are left, and we obviously don't want to upset the community too, and we don't want to release snakes too close to other houses. So it's a very, very tight little battle that we run. And I've got stuff all over my car, so if someone sees my car pulled up on the side of the road and I'm walking in the bush, they just instantly think the worst, that I'm releasing a massive brown snake, but usually it's just a python. But yeah, so it's an ongoing, you're sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place sometimes. But we try and find a bushland that suits the animal and not too far away, far enough away that it won't come back to that house. But we've got to also find an appropriate area for the snake. And often all bushland areas are surrounded by houses these days. So, we kind of don't have too many choices.
Might be a silly question, but what's the reason why you can't release in conservation areas? Is it because they're trying to monitor the area and they don't want anything introduced?
So I guess the explanation I've got over years is that because of the species or the reason why it's a conservation area, they don't want that balance being disrupted.
Right.
I guess one of the examples I was told is, like, if there's an endangered frog species in that area, then they don't want a heap of frog-eating snakes being released in there. But, as it all naturally works, if there's frogs in an area, there's going to be snakes. It's part of the food chain. So that's kind of where I'm having discussions at the moment, just around, I guess, opening up a few more areas to release snakes, because we're just running out of. We don't want to put them all in the same spot either. You know what I mean? Like, there's some very busy suburbs. Like, we're extremely busy sometimes. Like, even today in Budrum, on a pretty miserable day, I'm pretty sure I had 5 or 6 jobs in Budrum alone today.
Wow.
In one suburb. Now, it wasn't actually a very busy day. I don't know why there were so many snakes in Budrum, but now I've got to try and find a spot to put these 6 snakes, and I want to try and put them maybe in different spots, because I don't want to just release 6 snakes in the one habitat, because I don't want to put that habitat out of balance either. You know what I mean? So it's a very sort of fine line that we're running. So
what do you do when you're catching these snakes? You're bringing them back to HQ, and do you sort of hold on to them until you've got the opportunity, or you work out exactly where you're going to release them? How many do you hold on to until you can take the next step?
Generally it's catch and release as soon as possible, like even on the way to the next job, because you want to release them in the same suburb, in the same similar area. And just, if I was to hold on to them and then have to drive back all to those areas, it has to be just so time consuming. So we generally just try and catch and release basically straight away, and it's good for the animal too to get it out of the bag and back in the bush. And also, the only time we'd ever hold on to it is if we suspected it was injured, or we're just monitoring it for some reason. Although if they are injured, we usually take them to the wildlife hospital. So, but generally it's just catch and release on the same day, or even within like an hour.
What's the most common call-outs that you get? Is there sort of a number one that sort of tops the list? Yeah,
so the most common species that we catch is definitely the carpet python. So it's probably. I was actually talking about doing up some pie charts of, the 5 or 6 years of snake catching that I've done, just with all the species and how many and what percentage, which I might do over the next couple of days if it's still rainy. But excuse me. But they're definitely the most common. Probably I'd say at a guesstimate, like 40% of our work. Right. Like today, I'm pretty sure it was nearly 100%, just because on these sort of rainy days, really, it's only pythons that we catch. But across the whole board, on average, I reckon it'd be about 30 to 40%. And then, a lot of the other ones are pretty similar. So your tree snakes, your keelbacks, which are your freshwater snakes, and then, different times of year, we get a lot of brown snakes, and other times of the year we don't. So at the moment, we're not catching many of brown snakes, but during September, October, we were probably getting 5 or 6 calls a day for brown snakes.
Wow.
So, yeah, depending on the time of year, breeding season, whether it's warm, cold, whatever, it does vary.
Well, that's actually something I was going to ask you about, because my sort of stereotypical thought about snakes, and even having a business like yours, I just automatically thought that you would be busy during the warm months and the humid months, and then when it's cold, you'd be sitting around twiddling your thumbs, sort of wondering what you can do with your time. But I assume that there's probably always something happening that, you've throughout the year, no matter what. It's just like the species changes or the types of callouts change.
We definitely, there is a bit of variance in, I guess, what species we go to, but it definitely does slow down, though, for 3 months of the year during winter, like quite dramatically. So we still find ourselves probably doing maybe 3 or 4 jobs on average during winter a day. So, and some days you might get 6 or 7, and other days you get none. So it can vary, but I guess that's the time of year where snake catchers either go on holidays or, catching up on paperwork, or, putting together old videos and that. So there's always seems to be something to do with the business. But yeah, I guess, it does definitely slow down for sort of June, July, August. It always, it does definitely slow down. But this time of year, you kind of, at the end of the season, to be honest, you kind of look forward to that time, because for 8 or 9 months of the year, it is absolutely mental. There are some days where the phone literally does not stop ringing 24/7, 24 hours for that day. We get phone calls after midnight quite regularly. I had one last night. I got woken at, I try and go to the gym and be active as much as possible. And I try and go to the gym at sort of 4:30, 5 o'clock every morning just to get the day going. And last night I did 2 snake calls myself, I think at 7 and 8 o'clock. And then I came home, went to bed about 9:30, got woken at 10:30 and 11:30 for another 2 jobs, which I didn't go to those 2, but you still get woken and, throws you around a bit. But, we get so many calls after hours, especially when it's warm now and humid.
Have you seen or noticed any changes in the behaviour of certain species over the years? Like, I don't know whether, like, even where I am in Sydney now, I mean, the last week or so, or probably the last couple of weeks, we've just got this really miserable drizzly rain and just very cold weather, and it's unusual for this time of year. Have you seen that there's just been sort of unseasonal sort of behaviour from different species over the past few years?
Not necessarily. Like, it can be relatively easy to predict. I've got sort of stats now for 3 or 4 years, and they're quite good stats, so I can sort of tell when it sort of picks up and slows off. And, you see the rain coming, you see the breeding season start, and then there's a few little factors, like when it first starts getting up over sort of 23, 24 degrees in, August, September, the snakes start kicking off. But yeah, like big downpours of rain can slow snakes a little bit, but then, we got 300 mil probably 2.5, 3 weeks ago up here, and it was pretty quiet obviously those few days, but since then it's been ballistic. So bit of rain, all the frogs come out, all the rodents are on the move, and then snakes are on the move. So, there are little signs, but it's weird. Sometimes, it can be 30 degrees out, sun shining, and you get like 2 phone calls, for the morning, and you're like, what the heck's going on? And then the clouds roll in, gets a bit humid, and you get another 15 for the afternoon. So it's like, different little temperatures, and sometimes it's easy to read. Other times you're just like, well, one, why isn't the phone ringing? And then other times it's like, why the hell is the phone ringing so much? Like, it just doesn't make sense. So you're like, I've had busy days on days where it's pouring rain. It just so happens that all those snakes decide to come in and shelter, in houses or underneath the porches of houses, and people see them, so they want us to come out. But yeah, it's definitely varied, that's for sure.
What's the most unusual place you've found a snake?
That is a very, very open-ended question, and I could probably spend about 3 hours, but...
I should have started with that.
I know, and we'd still be talking, trust me. No, I think there's a couple of stories that I always tell, but basically, in short, you could walk around your house and basically anywhere you look, or in any household item, under any household item, in any cupboard around your house, I've caught a snake in it.
Wow.
So I've caught them, just for instance, like I've caught them, obviously under fridges, on top of fridges, under ovens, under beds, on beds, in washing machines, in dryers, obviously just on the move in a house in general. In closets for some reason is quite popular. Like they go into a bedroom and then the best place to hide is in the closet with all the crap. So we find ourselves pulling apart people's closets. But no, I think one which is quite amazing that I always sort of retell the story is I went to this house late at night and it was a bit of a hoarder's house and wasn't very well maintained and sort of rubbish and crap everywhere and the occupants, it seemed like they maybe had a few drinks that night, and I walked in. They're like, "Yeah, the massive carpet python on the move in our kitchen." They're like, "Yeah, it went under that oven." And I was like, "Okay, this should be an easy job." It was just one of those freestanding ovens, those old school ones. So I pulled the oven out, and there was no snake. And I was like, oh, there must be a hole, because sometimes in these old kitchens there's holes at the back where the wires run in underneath the kitchen cupboards and the snakes get in there and then you just literally can't get them unless you rip apart the kitchen. But yeah, so I couldn't find them. I'm like, there's no holes either. Like, you guys watching it the whole time? They're like, yeah, we literally have not moved. And I'm like, far out. So I started pulling apart the oven. So I'm taking off, like, I thought, oh, maybe it's up behind the notches and the nozzles, and then I took that off. There's a big space there, no snake. Took apart the back, looked in all the back, no snake, and I'm like, what is going on? This is like 11:30 at night too, so I'm starting to get angry. I'm like, right, I'll just take the side off and I'll just check the sides where there's basically an inch of insulation around the side of the oven, I guess, just so the outside doesn't get too hot. And I pull it off, and I kid you not, there was an 8-foot carpet python that had curled itself up in a perfect spiral in this inch gap, like flattened its body out proper, a huge python. And I was like, wow. And from basically that day on, I'm like, if I search a room and I, thoroughly and I can't find the snake, I'm like, I still got to search this 2 more times because I've seen where they can hide, and I've seen, like, I've caught tiny little snakes hiding in like a binded folder on like the top shelf of a closet that is completely full, and it was like the last thing I looked, and literally had to open the folder and wedge between the paper was a snake. that's how insane the spots are that they can hide.
I'm just looking, as you're saying that, I'm looking around my room and I've got so much shit in here. I've got piles of books and boxes and I'm just looking going, okay, a snake could be there, could be there, could be there, could be there. It's, and I guess, I mean, they're always great stories to hear because, it's, I think, yes, there's this sort of default fear that we all have of snakes, but I guess, do you always hesitate a little bit when you talk about these sort of things with people because you're worried that it might sort of fuel the narrative of that fear?
And that's the thing, like, and people, and that's the thing in the back of my mind with the social media stuff, because, I'm not going to put a post on the wall of me just walking in and picking up a curled up python, that's sitting on the grass, very, very boring. And that's, majority of our calls aren't that exciting. You know what I mean? Like, social media just sees the exciting ones. But I think people, when they see that, they think that's all that we get is those crazy, exciting, ridiculous places. Like when a few weeks ago, or maybe it's a couple of months ago now, where I walked into a kid's bedroom and there was a toy basket and there was a 4.5-foot red belly inside the toy basket.
God.
That's only ever happened like a couple of times in 6 years. But people see that and they're like, oh my God, there's going to be a red belly in my toy basket. So I guess that's the downside to the social media stuff, is that, we only put the good stuff up. You know what I mean? Because there's no point putting the other stuff up. Like, it just doesn't get any reaction. And I guess from a business point of view, I need people to talk about it and react and comment and that sort of stuff for business to grow and people to be educated. If I just put boring videos up, people will never watch them. So, I guess that is a downside, the fact that people just think that this always happens. Like there's always red bellies in toy baskets, or there's always Easton Brown snakes in a bedroom, but it's not the case. Like a lot of the time it's just we're walking in and catching a python that's just in a tree in the backyard or curled up underneath a pot plant. It's not very exciting stuff, but yeah, I guess that's probably one of the downsides, I guess, of the social media posts.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I think if I was in your shoes, I'd be doing exactly the same thing. I mean, it's smart business, and I think in the end, you want people to be aware of what you're doing, and it's a reasonable approach to take. And I guess, I mean, the only thing you can do, which I think you're really sort of investing a lot of time in doing anyway, is bringing that awareness piece around what they are, what they're all about, what their purpose is, and some of their behaviours as well. And as you said before, they're not aggressive in the sense that they're seeking out people to try and inflict harm. It's, in most cases, they're absolutely terrified and they just want their space and to be able to find somewhere, quiet and dark to hide. And I think that, that's all you can do is keep telling those storylines attached with the videos along the way.
Well, that's it. Yeah. And I think, that's where social media over the last year or two have implemented those stories, which you can put up, an Instagram story or a Facebook story, which lasts for 24 hours and disappears. And that's where we put up a lot of our boring, what we think is boring, but a lot of people still love it. Stories of us just picking up pythons or tree snakes or that sort of thing. So yeah, that sort of gives people perception. And every now and then we'll just put up a video. I think like today where I caught a nice big python that was hanging out near a bird feeder. It's probably, not the most exciting call or the most exciting video, but people still respond, and that's just another part of the job is, you get your 6-foot brown snakes and the hectic ones where the heart's racing and the adrenaline's pumping, but then you also get the pretty calm ones. And it's always good to show that side of snakes as well, not just like these terrified snakes trying to slither away from us, but showing, us gently pick up a python and seeing it just slither all over us and not be bothered, it sheds snakes in a positive light.
I think even the most boring of videos that you guys think you're putting out there would probably be incredibly wild for a lot of people out there that
absolutely
might not have ever seen a snake in real life themselves. So I think it's all good. It's a good balance to have.
And that's it. Like I went out with some media recently, a couple of the big networks, and they came out on a couple of calls and videoed it and for a news story, and we only caught a couple of pythons, and I sort of got to the end of it and I actually felt a little bit bad. I'm like, is that okay, guys? Like, do you want to come back tomorrow? And they're like, oh my goodness, that was the best day ever. Like those calls were amazing. I'm like, okay, if you're happy with them, like, they're pretty boring to me. But yeah, like you said, I think to people who don't work with snakes, it's can be quite exciting and quite crazy to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you had any near misses or any bites yourself over the years?
I've never been bitten, touch wood.
Touch wood for you.
By like a highly venomous snake. I've been bitten by mildly venomous snakes a couple of times, but just a little bit of pain and that was it. But yeah, so I certainly have had some near misses. I guess there's probably three notable ones. One was when I caught, there was 2 Easton Brown snakes hanging under a deck around a pool at someone's house in Twin Waters, and I went over and got the first one, and when I grabbed it right next to the pool, but I left my snake bag, way back, and I was sort of, back then, this is 4 or 5 years ago, I was a little bit on the cowboy side still, making my way in the industry and, just trying to, kind of like I'm definitely do things differently after that day. But yeah, as I was sort of walking the snake back, I made a few mistakes. I didn't keep its head on the ground. I sort of kind of dawdled back and didn't really take it, I guess, as serious as I should have. And then I swung the bag around once I got back to my bag, and and as I swung it around, obviously the snake reacted and come straight back up on itself, and literally went past my fingers within like millimeters of my fingers. And if it had made contact, it would have bit me for sure. But in saying that, that actually happened again this year, where I thought I was in complete control, where similar situation, I had to back and get to an area where I could safely bag the snake up, and this time, with all the experience I've gained since that moment 4 or 5 years ago, kept the snake's head on the ground. Everything was fine. And literally the snake went from having its head on the ground to past my wrist and nearly like curled. We've got a vision of it, which is pretty crazy. And like curled basically around my wrist, and I ended up dropping the snake and running after it and catching it again. But, it can happen. Doesn't matter if you've been doing it for 3 months or you've been doing it for 20 years. Like, you've got to be 100% on your game. And I guess another one was when I nearly got bitten in the face by a red belly when I pulled this huge red belly out of a rat trap. And, it was 35 degrees out and this red belly's hot and it's fired up because it's been stuck in a rat trap. And as soon as I pulled it out and I went to bag it up, it just sort of shot up on itself and just flung itself. I don't think I was actually trying to bite me in the face, but yeah, when you slow the footage down, it got within about 2 inches of my nose. So, yeah. So that's but I had those were probably the 3 notable ones that I can remember.
I assume it's similar to what you said earlier about Crocs, where you have to have an element of wariness and a little bit of not nervousness, but you just have to be sort of understanding that there is an unpredictability of the situation where you need to be on your toes. You can't be too complacent, otherwise you're going to be in one of these situations.
Yeah, well, that's it. You got to be ready to go and basically prepare for the worst if something was to go wrong, or that snake was to react differently, or just put all its effort into trying to bite you back on the fingers, where you're holding on the tail. So you just have to sort of be ready for it. And if that small lapse in concentration can, it could involve you being bitten.
Oh, jeez. All right. Well, before we wrap it up, I guess the responsible thing for me to ask you is that if anybody out there does come across a snake at home or on their travels, obviously, don't get near it, but are there any sort of first steps that people should be considering as far as being able to manage or deal with a snake?
Yeah, so obviously if there's ever a bite, it's keep the patient calm, no moving, sitting down, correct first aid bandage applied, and then call the ambulance.
Don't suck the venom out?
No, definitely don't do that, or don't pee on the patient, anything like that. But and that's so important. Hey, like that pressure bandage could literally be the difference between life and death if you don't do it correctly. So it's always good for people to refresh that and have one with them whenever they're walking around or camping or that sort of thing. Or you should always have probably one in each car at home, and then maybe a couple in the kitchen or something ready to go just in case. But at home, like obviously if there's a snake in the backyard, remove the danger. So basically get all kids, pets, and everybody else away from the snake and get them inside. And if you want to relocate it, obviously call a snake catcher. If it's inside, definitely call a snake catcher. Same thing, get everybody away from it, all the pets, and try and isolate it, I guess, in a bedroom or something if it does go in there, by shutting the door and, putting a towel under the door. But yeah, I guess it's just about common sense. Like take a couple of seconds to assess the situation. A lot of people just panic and, there's just no need to panic. I understand that it's a snake and a lot of people are scared of them, but you sort of just take time to assess the situation. You'll notice that the snake's only trying to get away. So, just if you want to relocate it, the best thing to do is just, call a snake catcher and never, ever try and catch it yourself. And it's obviously illegal to harm them as well.
And I assume that, there are instances, and probably most instances, where it's unavoidable. I mean, it is what it is, the situation that's occurred. But there's certain scenarios that you see where people could have had, like you mentioned the hoarder earlier, and there's certain environments that you see, people's houses, that are probably just absolute magnets for snakes, and they shouldn't be.
Oh, absolutely. So people's houses which are just never been pruned in their life, and tin and bricks and timber everywhere that are just making little homes for rodents and snakes coming in, and people with chicken coops that aren't completely snake proof. Like that's a big thing. We get so much work from people who have chicken coops, bird aviaries, guinea pig enclosures where the snakes get in and eat one of them and then can't get out, and they've just got a snake locked in the enclosure. So I guess if you're going to have and keep these animals, then you need to make sure that one, the enclosures are snake proof, and two, you keep them as clean as possible, because snakes will come in not only for the pets, but also the rodents that come because of either the bird seed or the chicken feed or whatever. So I guess, cleaning up your yard's a big start. Like, I get there's no way of 100% keeping snakes away. Like, there's no deterrence or anything like that. But yeah, keeping a nice clean yard and keeping on top of rodent control. I mean, saying that, a python around your yard is pretty much free rodent control, or a python in your roof will take care of all of that. So yeah, I guess that's a few little tips there, and I guess just being smart if you ever do come across a snake, and don't do anything stupid.
That's probably the big thing. Don't do anything stupid.
Yeah, common sense literally goes a long way. And like people, you'd be surprised at some of the messages and phone calls we get. Like, people will send us a text message of them holding a snake, being like, "What is this snake?" And the first response is, "Why are you holding it if you don't know what it is?" You know what I mean? Like, just stuff like that. We've had pictures of people holding Easton Browns, baby Easton Brown snakes, and it's like a miracle that they weren't bitten. So yeah.
Oh, jeez. Actually, one quick thing, and I'll keep you on the time, but I was watching a video the other day, and are they whippets? Is that the
whip snakes?
Whip snakes, yeah. Now, I mean, obviously, we've got all these notorious snakes, these like taipans and browns and the likes and red bellies, but those snakes scare the shit out of me because they're so quick. They seem to be uncontrollable. Like, I mean, I think there's one where you were grabbing it out of it might have been out of a bathroom or something like that. It was a mother with a couple of kids or something like that, and you're grabbing it out. It was just moving so quickly. I mean, are they common? I mean, I assume they're probably more harmless snakes out of the lot of them. But are they common snakes that you see out and about?
Yeah, the whip snakes are. They're quite common in most areas, and I'd say a majority, probably over 50% of the time that someone rings in and says they've got a brown snake, it's usually a whip snake. But yeah, so I guess it's one of those things where there's probably 3 or 4 species that come under that sort of browny colour here on the coast, and it can be so hard to distinguish between them. But yeah, whip snakes, and they're super hard to catch too because they're literally so fast, and they're often and they're so scared of people. Like, I've never seen even a defensive whip snake. Like, they'll never stand their ground. As soon as they see you, they just bolt for cover, and then they're so small and so fast, it's so hard to find them in a garden bed, even if you've isolated it, you know what I mean? Like, I've pulled garden beds apart and still not found them. So yeah, they can be super hard to catch, but quite common to catch as well. I actually caught one. We caught one today, but I caught one yesterday as well in someone's shower. So they're one of those snakes that's long and slender and skinny like a tree snake, and those two are the main two that get inside houses just because they can squeeze under doors and gaps, and that's another thing which I should have touched on before, is that do a lap of your house and check the perimeter and make sure that your sliding doors don't have gaps. You don't have gaps under your front door or your back door, around the roller door of the garage, and maybe install fly screens if you want to keep the doors open, because that's the main way snakes get in. People open the door for 5 minutes to let some breeze in. The next thing you know, there's a snake in the lounge room. So
just inviting themselves in.
Yeah, well, that's it. So yeah, you kind of just got to be careful and just make sure that you've done the best you can to keep snakes away if that's the way you want to go.
All right, guys, you got to follow Stu & Co on the socials. Get onto Instagram and Facebook by searching Sunshine Coast Snake Catchers. Of course, if you're in the Sunshine Coast region, I would definitely be jotting down Stu's details. But go to Sunshine Coast Snake Catchers 24-7.com.au and make sure those details are within reach, because you never know. But definitely go and check out the videos. Make sure you follow and like the pages. Support them no matter where you are in the world. It's amazing stuff. And even if you don't need the service of getting a snake caught or collected from your home, I think just the piece of awareness around these amazing reptiles is well worth following and supporting the greater cause. So go and check all that out. Of course, everything will be in the show notes over at andysocial.net and andydowling.net. And whatever the hell you're listening to this through right now, there should be a bunch of clickable links as well. So click through. Go and follow them on the socials. Go and say hi to Stu & Co. Let them know you heard them on the Antisocial podcast, and I'm sure they'll be stoked to hear from you. Now, before we wrap it up, of course, patreon.com/AndyDowling. I'm absolutely overwhelmed with the support. I'm so happy with everyone who's jumped on board over the past, it's been less than a year that I've been up and running on Patreon, but already I've got a crew of people that have been backing me, supporting me, and it's been covering the costs of hosting, whether it be podcast hosting, website hosting, podcast editing, production, replenishing, updating gear. What else have we got? All sorts of stuff. There's a whole bunch of costs that come into running a podcast, and the Patreon support has helped cover this, take a bit of the weight off my shoulders, and let me focus on having these great conversations, finding new people to have on the podcast, and sharing these great stories and people with you all. So thank you so much. And of course, Patreon are the reason why this episode is one of two of this week, and for this year will be 2 episodes per week. So I'm really up in the ante, getting more and more people out and into the Antisocial archives. So go back and listen to the past 260 episodes. Go back and have a listen to them. So for the month of January, usually I do a little bit of a shout out for the top tier legends on Patreon, but for January at least, I'm going to just do a quick shout out for everybody that's on Patreon. So here's my little Patreon list. So listen to that. So thank you very much to Ryan from Adelaide, Andrew from Perth, Mick G from Sydney, Ash from Deniliquin, Dan from Dapto, Riley from Sydney, the Towhider guys from Melbourne, Lords of the Trident from Madison, Wisconsin, Sean from Oregon, the US, Johnny from South Australia, Zach from Adelaide, Rod from Rayleigh in North Carolina, Matt from Adelaide, Saul from Oxford in the UK, Patrick from Canberra, Liam from Brisbane, Tom from Melbourne, Chris from Sydney, Frank from Utengruppenbach, I don't even know if I ever pronounced that properly, but anyway, Utengruppenbach from Germany, Lewis from Airlie Beach, Turner from Armidale, Samantha from Sydney, Brendo from Leeton, Tim from Canberra, James from Brisbane, Bradley from Canberra, Sean from Melbourne, Kurt from Brisbane, Jason from Adelaide, Christian from Canberra, Cole from Port Kembla, and Jordan from Bendigo. Thank you so much, folks. And if you have joined in the last week or two, then apologies if I haven't read your name out just yet. I am recording some of these a little bit in advance. But thank you so much, guys. You are the reason why Antisocial is still cranking in 2021 and why we're doing 2 episodes a week as well. So thank you very much. Jump on over to Patreon, patreon.com/AndyDowling. It starts from $1 a month. I'm really keen to collect as many $1 supporters as possible. I think that'd be really cool. It's a nice, easy way to support the podcast. You won't even notice $1 coming out of your account each month. And it's just, it's a really cool way to validate and support and just lift this podcast up to higher and higher levels of success. But there are additional tiers if you want access to the exclusive Patreon podcast as well that comes out every Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. There's a bit of karaoke, a bit of story time, a bit of general just hoo-ha dribble from your mate Andy, and it's just a bit of fun. So hopefully you guys that are already on Patreon are really enjoying those podcasts as well. So go and check it out, patreon.com/AndyDowling. Now, this week, the second episode coming out on Wednesday morning is a musician. It is a return guest, somebody that hasn't been on the podcast for a very long time. And I'm really excited to share this person with you. So I reckon when you guys see this one announced, especially for Australian music fans, you'll be really, really pumped to listen to this one. So looking forward to sharing that with you. I'm pretty sure, as I'm saying this right now, I'm having doubts as to whether that's actually the person I'm thinking of. I'm pretty sure it is. Nonetheless, it'll be an amazing guest no matter what. All right, time to cut it off, Andy. Thank you so much. Until next episode, take care and ta-ta. Larry.